But afterwards they said, you know what, we saw him do it in the rehearsals, and he did it anyway.
All right, so whatever. Let's not make him the story that taking a knee. I thought he was great. I thought the hip-hop was a great salute to a brand of music that emerged in Southern California, many people say, or certainly in urban environments. And Dr. Dre, and I think people can appreciate where they came from.
Of course, the goons at Fox News couldn't help themselves by throwing urban in their analysis of the Super Bowl halftime show.
Well, let's talk about Eminem kneeling during the halftime performance. Some people were saying that he defied the NFL by doing that. But according to reports, this was rehearsed. They knew it was going to happen. They said players have been kneeling with no repercussions. So there's no issue with that.
Great rumor to put out, though.
They did also say they asked Dr. Dre to remove his lyric on Still Not Loving Police, by the way. And Still Dre is another fun fact.
Yeah, I thought they
NFL
bleeped it out, but I think he did. I think it flew last night.
Charlemagne is right that some of it flew, but the real story is everything that went into the Super Bowl halftime performance, everything that occurs within the NFL's ranks, and everything that occurred outside SoFi Stadium. There was a story that broke prior to the Super Bowl. Would Detroit's own Eminem take a knee? Is the NFL overtly censoring its performers? Let's answer the latter first.
Lamar stated his views on police brutality with that line in the song, quote, "And we hate the popo, want to kill us in the street, faux show." KG.
Please. Ugh, I don't like it.
When censorship comes up, this is what the NFL latches onto. The voices of conservative America. Going back and watching Kendrick's performance, on the hook, all right, he left out
popo.
In its place, a drummer can be heard double tapping the ride cymbal. Puck News reported a source close to the artist complained that Dre was being disgustingly censored. How? The league apparently didn't want its premiere event to turn into a divisive culture war moment, like it even would. In particular, I'm told, NFL reps indicated to Dre during rehearsals they weren't comfortable with a lyric from Still Dre, which states he's still not loving police. In that song, he did utter that very line. Whether he said F it and did it, the NFL saw the backlash and approved it, or it was to take place all along. Here's the thing, we'll just never know. Puck News went on to report the league nixed a plan by Eminem to kneel, Colin Kaepernick style. Organizers also flagged something that Snoop Dogg was set to wear as possibly appearing gang-related. Asked about new limitations placed on halftime performers, a spokesperson for the league did not respond. That was prior to the Super Bowl. After M did indeed take a knee, the NFL quickly went on the offensive through the media, saying they knew it was happening all along. Speaking with Fox News, NFL spokesperson Brian McCarthy said of the Puck News report, that report was erroneous. We watched all elements of the show during multiple rehearsals this week and were aware that Eminem was going to do that, he added. If so, a simple follow-up, something along the lines of, the game feed appeared to cut away right after Eminem took a knee. Was this random wide shot supposed to be taken at this time of the performance? It would simply dispel any criticisms, however, the question was never asked. Looking at the bigger picture, David Dennis wrote, the more I think about this, the NFL didn't want Eminem to kneel or Dr. Dre to mention the police story, the more I feel like that's exactly the type of story you put out to make it seem like you're doing something subversive instead of just shilling for an anti-black organization, as in the NFL.
One opponent of the flag wasn't waiting for that. Last weekend, she took matters into her own hands.
Ma'am, come down off the pole.
With just a harness and a prayer, Bree Newsom scaled a 30-foot flagpole at South Carolina's state capitol and took down the Confederate battle flag. Tell me what's going on here.
Oh man, it was just like I was honestly feeling just kind of like a David and Goliath moment right there.
Newsom, a 30-year-old activist, teamed up with James Tyson in what they saw as a classic example of civil disobedience. So there's a school of thought that says, hang on, the legislature is going to come back and meet and deal with this. Let the process work.
Or the process is broken.
Bree Newsom Bass, who you may remember from scaling the flagpole in South Carolina to remove the Confederate flag outside the state's capital, well, she also, by the way, has an essay in Abolition for the People, which was released by Kaepernick Publishing. Her timeline is always introspective, with must-read, well-thought-out dialogue. After the performance, she wrote, they have them literally dancing over Compton as the stage as they censor criticism of police from the performance. You could write a whole dissertation on this year's Super Bowl. Like many others, Bass criticized the NFL's end racism messaging because it's clear through the attacks on Colin Kaepernick and the cooperation of the NFL's owners to intentionally place him out of the league, then the aftermath of demanding players not kneel to serve its conservative/Trumpian fan base.
The investigation into a lawsuit claiming the NFL uses race as a factor in determining which former players are compensated for suffering head injuries.
Two different systems? How can that be okay? Why should that be okay?
It's a controversial practice commonly known as race norming.
The effect of using this race norm for the NFL is that it drastically limits the amount of damages they're going to have to pay out. It's almost the classic definition of racial discrimination.
The racial bias practices the league put forth to limit the payouts to black retirees, Brian Flores' lawsuit serving as a microcosm for the league, with its treacherous hiring practices in a league whose players are predominantly black, where owners who just happen to serve in Donald Trump's administration as ambassador to, say, Great Britain, allegedly make racist comments about minorities and sexist comments about women. There's the endless defense of the Washington R-words, not to mention more sexism from their team owner, Daniel Snyder.
The owner of the Houston Texans is apologizing after his comments about the ongoing protests of NFL players during the national anthem. During a meeting between players and owners last week, Bob McNair said if the league didn't stop the protests, it would be like, quote, inmates running the prison.
A now deceased owner speaking of the NFL's black workforce during the protests, and of course not to mention SoFi Stadium's development, and in effect, the systemic displacement of Englewood residents, seeing folks unable to afford living in the area anymore, the human rights abuses of the homeless, capped off with ICE officials patrolling the area throughout the week. Thus, Bass added, putting end racism on helmets and field goal posts and showcasing hip-hop at the halftime while scrubbing any political speech is the white power structure's way of papering over these realities and getting everyone to reinvest in structural racism on the promise of participation. Responding to a tweet about an entire dissertation being written, Bass wrote, the NFL succeeded because they got black people to reinvest in the system, in the one industry where we dominate enough of the labor force that a boycott could have led to substantial change in the NFL and the larger society. That was the plan, and it worked. Left Sent This added, Eminem taking a knee as presumably a show of solidarity with Kaepernick while performing in the Super Bowl for the league that blackballed him in a concert likely orchestrated by someone many say backstabbed him ain't the rebellious act folks are making it seem to be. Lastly, Warren Gunnels wrote, can't stop thinking about how the owner of the Rams worth $12.5 billion was able to receive a $100 million tax break to build a $5 billion stadium named after a student loan company while 45 million Americans owe $1.8 trillion in student debt and 600,000 are homeless. Thus, after it all, the headlines today will be printed as follows. A win for Jay-Z, who signed on to do halftime shows. A win for NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell, and a win for the billionaire class that runs every piece of it.